Hi, and welcome to my sci-fi, fantasy, and horror short fiction roundup for April 2023. And I've got a bunch of stories to cover here, so I'm going to dive right in. As usual, you can find the text version of this roundup on my website, Maria's Reading. There's a link in the description for the video. And the artwork for this roundup includes a detail of DM7's art for Lightspeed number 155. And more about the artist you can find in the link also in the description. So let's kick off this roundup. My first story pick is The Time Traveler's Cookbook by Angela Liu in Cast of Wonders, and it's narrated by Mei Chong. And it has such a great beginning here. By the way, if you hear sounds in the background, it's the dog. He's on a very creaky couch. Anyway, back to Angela Liu's story in Cast of Wonders. So, in the beginning of the story, it says, "Don't eat dinosaur. Just don't." And oh, how I love this story. It's a time travel story that is both whimsical and heartbreaking. The food, the recipes, the time travel tips, they're all fabulous and funny. But Liu's story is also a deeply emotional tale about family and grief, and about trying to find a way to move forward, even when it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. My next story pick is also from Cast of Wonders, and it is Crown Prince by Melissa Mead. Cast of Wonders, it's narrated by Jordan Corella. This is a fairy tale about a prince, but it's a fairy tale with a difference. Mead's story deals with cerebral palsy and the ways in which this condition can make others view you quite differently. I love this story for its fresh perspective and for its terrific characters. And also for the palace intrigue, which Mead does really, really well here. My next story pick is Bird by Uyun Deng in Necessary Fiction. And it starts out, at the beginning of the story, it says, "Several years ago, the rain started or two would dissolve into oblivion only to later reappear, suddenly, in physical form at the edge of the city." I love this story. It's a surreal and uniquely imagined story where, just like in the passage I read, memories are stripped away but don't actually quite fully disappear. I love the story's unabashed strangeness and the way that strangeness is made so real and tangible. Deng's evocative prose has the feel and melody of poetry, which gives this story real depth and heart. My next story pick is Through the Glass a Full Sea by P.H. Lowe in Apparition Lit. And it's got such a great opening, this story. There is a girl behind the mirror. You see her first when you are 5, pinching your nose and cheeks and wondering if the greenish shade of your skin, which you'll later learn is just the tint of the glass, means you're made of cheese. Oh, what a story. A life and the process of trying to understand what your life can be, what you can be, and what you want to be is captured with exquisite brilliance in this short story. Lowe twists in a strand of horror with the recurring presence in mirrors and other reflections, but the pain of the story goes beyond horror tropes. It's beautiful, heart-rending darkness. My next story pick is The Librarian and the Robot by Shi Heiyao in Clarkesworld, translated by Andy Dudek. This is a lovely, quietly moving science fiction story about a far future where humans have left Earth and colonized other planets, but where one person, the curator, has returned to the old home planet. There, she finds an old library and begins to salvage books. And when she also salvages a military robot, she finds new uses for it, too. I love the gentleness of this story as it explores human nature and the nature of artificial intelligence, and how we can become something different than the world wants to make us into. My next story pick is also from Clarkesworld. It's Voices Singing in the Void by Rajan Khanna. And this is another beautifully written science fiction story with a deep sadness and sense of loss at its heart, yet it's not without hope and wonder. On various planets in the universe, human-constructed builders have made places where people were supposed to live, and yet no people have arrived. Kana's story travels to these different worlds and sees them through the eyes and minds of these AIs, the builders, and then returns to Earth, where we learn the difficult truth. My next story pick is One Eye Opened in That Other Place by Christy Nogle and Three-Lobed Burning Eye. Now, the new issue of Three-Lobed Burning Eye is always good news if you like your speculative fiction dark and weird. Nogle's story about a man who can see another place with his third eye is just such a dark and weird story. There's a quiet, ever-increasing strangeness to the story that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. And the ending? The ending is a scream. My next story pick is Kudzu Boy Dreaming by S.J. Powell in Faya number 26. And it starts off with he's 10 years old when he finds the body in the kudzu patch. In the story, a boy and his mother live in a house where there's magic, both protective magic and terrifying, threatening magic at play. Beyond the house, the kudzu grows, and one day the boy finds a dead body there. Powell's story has a dreamlike undercurrent, but is also firmly rooted in a real and vividly drawn world that is seen from a child's perspective. What is real and what isn't, what is dangerous and what is not, are not always easy things to determine. And there's a dream/nightmare sequence in this story that is absolute terrifying perfection. And that scene is going to haunt me for a while. My next story pick is Root Canticle by Natasha King in Nightmare. And it is this story, I love it. I'll read a passage from it. Oh dear, don't bother going back up the stairs. Yes, they exist still, but the door at the top will no longer take you anywhere you would wish to go. Look, the vines, if that is what we want to call them, have made some room. Sit. I adore this unsettling, hallucinogenic, twisting tale that goes into the past and into the earth and into bodies as well. There's an old magic at work here, old stories and tales that have taken root, and King spins a beautifully mesmerizing tale from all of it. My next story pick is Victory Condition by Elliot Pepper in Anthropocene. And this is a thought-provoking future tale by Pepper about a world and a city, San Francisco, that has changed fundamentally and where human beings are finding new ways to live. The writer has some really interesting thoughts on this future San Francisco. But what I love the most about the story is the way it interweaves the old San Francisco with the new, and the way both nature and city feature so prominently in the story. My next story pick is Our Exquisite Delights by Megan Chi in Lightspeed. This is such a great twist on portal fantasies and all those fantasy tales about doors leading people to other places. Here, we see these doorways from the other side, from the perspective of whatever lives beyond these doors. And there's a slow-burning twist to this tale and the point of view of the narrator that makes it even more satisfying. My next story pick is also from Lightspeed. It's Construction Sacrifice by Bogi Takash. And it starts off, there's dysphoria, and then there's turning into a mid-sized city. But sometimes you try male, you try female, you try different kinds of non-binary, and it only makes you realize that something still doesn't quite fit. Something fundamental. Oh, this is an absolutely enthralling story. It's told from 2 points of view. One is the city of Fiyertoroni. I hope I can pronounce that somewhat correctly. A city that has a mind of its own, quite literally. The other is Mihue, a scholar called a clairvoyant, who comes to the city to study it and gain a deeper understanding of its past and present. And what follows is a connection between these two that has unexpected and life-altering consequences for them both. Takashi calls it a secondary world science fantasy story about trans love in difficult circumstances. And for more about the inspiration for the story, read the excellent interview in Lightspeed. My next story pick is Locavore by Kim Harbridge in Strange Horizons. This is such an excellent and such a fresh take on a horror story. Being a shapeshifter, a monster, isn't always easy. You have to be careful. You have to consider your options in order to not get caught, not to get found out, and still survive. Harbridge's story is both quiet and powerful, and I love the intimate, under-the-skin view we get of the kind of being that is usually only glimpsed in the shadows in horror stories. My next story pick is The Air Will Catch Us by Rajiv Mote in Reckoning. This is a quiet, almost contemplative science fiction story set in a future where humanity has had to make some drastic changes in order to survive. These changes are the new reality for the children growing up in it, but for those who still remember the world and the air, as they once were, it's a different story. There's a bittersweetness and wistfulness to the story that really got to me. My next story pick is The Dark House by A.C. Weiss and Tor.com. This is a profoundly unsettling and disturbing story by A.C. Weiss about a house, about the ghosts that haunt that house, and about the lives that seem tied to photos and ghosts and this house. There's a terrifying inevitability to the horror here. Everything has happened before and will happen again. Weiss has a fabulous ability to crank up the intensity of horror with masterful precision, and those skills are on full display in this story. My next story pick is The Lone Drummer by A.G. Lamar in Beneath Ceaseless Skies. Now, I love stories that tie together music and magic. And in A.G. Lamar's story, we find ourselves in a world where songs and drumming can be used for peaceful purposes, like making crops grow, and for war, as a weapon to defeat your enemy on the battlefield. Camus is a young boy with a great gift for drum magic. At a young age, his father sends him off to hone his skills and become part of the Royal Army. But this isn't just about battles and magic. Lamar's story is a multi-layered and fascinating look at a society that wields magic for a variety of purposes. And at the heart of the story is Camus, who is so very good at magic and drumming, but who is also deeply conflicted by going to war, and who still carries the pain of being sent away from his family when he was only 10 years old. It makes for a riveting and thoroughly compelling read set in a fascinating world. My next story pick is We, the Ones Who Raised Sam Gowers from the Dead by Cynthia Zhang in Pseudopod, narrated by Sarah L.A. There's such a profound fierceness and anger fueling the story, making it an intensely powerful and affecting read. I'm going to read a part of it. Yes, to answer your questions, we were the ones who did it. We were the ones who dabbled into the forbidden arts, who so casually threw away the good Christian values of our country for a flash of bloody vengeance. We are the ones you want, the ones who raised Sam Gowers from the dead. Now, the voice of the story is so strong and so bold, and I love how it never shies away from telling us the truths we already know, but sometimes try not to face, about the injustice, the cruelty, the bigotry, and the violence faced by Sam Gowers and others like him. I love the sharp teeth of the story, I love its unapologetic ferocity, and I love the raw emotion that runs through it, and the feeling of powerlessness turned into unexpected, unimaginable power when necromancy is used to turn the tables. My next story pick is 1,000 Echoes in One Voice by Deborah L. Davitt in Podcastle, and it's narrated by Dave Robison. And oh, this is my kind of story. A messed up time travel tale where different choices make new timelines, where worlds diverge and join, and where the paths to the past and the futures, and to other worlds are difficult to find and understand. David's story is haunting and evocative with a deep and dark heart. And that ending, it gave me bone-deep chills. My final story pick for this month's roundup is Sounds for Crustaceans by Addison Smith in Fantasy Magazine. So a while back I was talking on Twitter about crabs and how easily life forms through the eons seem to turn into crabs. It's a thing, look it up. And then someone recommended I read this story by Addison Smith, and I'm glad I did. It's from 2021, so I'm obviously way late in covering it here, but wow, what a story it is. Here, someone is turning into a crustacean. But it's not an easy process, and it's not easy to know what other people are going to think about such a transformation. Will they even believe it? Will they mock it? There's a surreal vibe here, and a tenderness beneath the chitin that is an absolute delight. And that's it. That's all my story picks for this month. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back next month. Thank you.